Let's begin now with this military crash in the Philippines. It's feared that death toll will rise.
Yes, absolutely. This is just an absolute tragedy. Anytime you see a military or really any aircraft, of course, going down and people dying, it's a tragedy. But several aspects of this. One is a lot of these were Philippine military recent recruits. They had just finished basic training, coming together. And I can speak from personal experience, just the cohesive unit, the friendship between people that have just completed something like military training together, to have something like this before they go on their first operation. And of course, they were actually moving into operations for what the Philippines view as a counterterrorism operation in the south there. So haven't heard anything besides it being an accident and the actual cause of it. But these aircraft were actually provided to the Philippines recently through a foreign military financing program from the United States. The C-130, a very reliable aircraft. I mean, it's been flying since the 1950s. This one, I think, was from 1988, but that's never been a concern. They are very long-term aircraft. Australia uses them. So surprised to see a C-130 go down. Could be one of multiple factors, but always a tragedy to see.
Yeah, and Jason, if we head back home now, the US, Japanese and South Korean warships, they've actually arrived in Sydney ahead of a military exercise.
Right. So one of the big things over the last year has been trying to make military exercises continue, even though in the COVID restricted environment. And of course, here in Sydney, these warships will be pulling in or have pulled in preparation for an annual quadrilateral exercise between Japan, South Korea, Australia, and the United States. So of course, again, from personal experience, having pulled into foreign ports, the sailors are very upset. I'm sure they're not being able to walk around Sydney, but they're pulling in for a couple days and then going out off the coast to conduct an annual exercise. Last year's this exercise is called Pacific Vanguard. Last year it was off of Guam. But the point is that these countries are really showing that even during a COVID restricted environment, they want to move forward with practicing the interoperability of their services. And we should just remember here in Australia that it isn't just Australia, but all of Australia and its allies that are critical to the defense of Australia in this region. And this is just another example of the preparation for that.
And we're also participating in those Sea Breeze exercises with Ukraine and the US and a number of other nations. Given the tensions that are between NATO and Russia, what implications will this have?
Yes, absolutely. So Australia is participating there in another part of the world in the Black Sea right now in exercise Sea Breeze. Now, unlike off the coast of Australia, where Pacific Vanguard takes place, the Black Sea is a international military tension hotspot right now, with Russia having recently threatened a British destroyer that was operating in the Black Sea in areas that they claimed were Russian waters, and that NATO claims are international waters. So that's the scene setting for Sea Breeze, which has 32 countries, 40 ships, 5,000 troops involved. So quite a large exercise. But this is an exercise which, yes, it was scheduled, and yes, it's meant to make a point that these nations can all be interoperable. But it's also during the timing is going to make a very strong statement toward Russia, with Russia having been ramping up tensions in the region, particularly amassing troops on the border of Ukraine. So you can expect a lot of Russian aggression toward that exercise, and a lot of comments. I think even President Putin made a statement about it this week, calling it another example of NATO aggression from his perspective. So definitely will raise tensions in that area, and something to watch.
Yeah, and as tensions rise there, we're also seeing some more movement, some more withdrawal occurring out of Afghanistan.
That's right. This was another big week in the milestone of the U.S. military turning over Bagram Air Force Base, the main Air Force base there in Afghanistan, over to the Afghan forces. And this is coming amidst a resurgence in the Taliban conducting offensive maneuvers all around Afghanistan. That was to be expected. As the U.S. pulled out, of course, the Taliban would want to show strength and try to show that the U.S. pulling out was a sign of weakness. But what is happening is currently the U.S. commander has been asked to stay there for several weeks and sort of create a plan as to what kind of counterterrorism operations could take place in Afghanistan without troops on the ground. So even as this withdrawal moves forward toward, again, another major milestone with the turning over of Bagram Air Force Base to Afghanistan, we're still going to see operations there. And of course, everything to watch is what we assume will be Taliban will try to continue to show strength and how much the U.S. can operate without troops on the ground remains to be seen.
Jason, just before I let you go, how did you celebrate July 4?
Oh, well, thank you. Actually, dressed up in red, white, and blue here in Sydney, and had some, kind of a American, burgers on the barbecue, and then apple pie. But definitely, we're in touch with friends back home celebrating, and of course, fireworks are ongoing here just about right now. So I'll make sure I try to tune in for some of those. Thanks for asking.
Thanks very much, Jason Israel, for your time today.
All the best. Thanks.